In the last episode, we've been introduced to this impressive exhibit of original vintage Fender instruments organized in Foggia with the support of Puglia Sounds by Flavio Camorani, Vincenzo Atzori, Michela Taioli and Luca Maggio of the Apulian Guitar Startup Association. Now we are about to continue this virtual tour, so before proceeding you might want to start from the beginning and check out the last episode BTR number 16 if you haven't already done so. The Fender Vintage Museum also features a good selection of amplifiers with samples from each of the subsequent periods of the vintage production. We start with a 1946 woody lap steel amplifier, a deluxe model 26, delivering 10 watts with a single 10 inches speaker. Then we have a few tweed models, such as this great sounding 1959 Bassman. The amplifiers of the early 60s had brown Tolex covering, or white Tolex for the top-of-the-line models, such as these 1963 Twin and 1963 Tremolax Piggyback, one of my favorite amplifiers ever. Then we have the black face or black panel models from mid to late 60s, and later so-called silver face amps from the 70s. The bass players also might feel satisfied. In fact, the electric bass is probably the most revolutionary instrument invented by the genius of Leo Fender. I really love the early precision bass with Telecaster-style punk body. They sound to me much like an electrified version of the upright bass. Their name is due to the fretted neck, which allowed the players an unprecedented precision of intonation compared to the fretless neck of the traditional upright bass. I fell in love with the sound of the original design precision when many years ago I saw playing live the great blues bass player of the Red Devils, Johnny Ray Bartell. He really had an unbelievable tone. The museum features a 1952 precision bass, probably kept for years in a smoky environment, and an amazing 1954 model. Between 1954 and 1956, the Precision underwent a progressive restyling work, making it eventually look more like a Stratocaster guitar. Right in front, we have the desk dedicated to the jazz bass. Introduced in 1960 with its offset body, we notice a very early model with the two couples of concentric volume and tone pots, known as stack knobs. Browsing through Camorani's collection, we found a gem that never gained the deserved recognition. In June 1965, following the trend of the time, Fender introduced the Electric 12, a 12-strings electric solid-body guitar with two split pickups and a four-way rotary selector switch. The instrument was still designed by Leo himself. This model ended up in the hands of Tim Buckley, Pete Townshend and Bob Dylan, who strapped it on during the recording sessions of Highway 61 Revisited. Jimmy Page used it for the studio recording of Starway to Heaven, and Beck's Bolero, recorded with Jeff Beck in 1966. Johnny Winter used it with only 6 strings, as seen at the Woodstock Festival in 1969 and at the 1970 Beat Club TV appearance. Lou Reed and Stanley Morrison of the Velvet Underground reportedly used it in classics like What Goes On, Beginning to See the Light and Rock and Roll. When the hype for 12-strings guitars ended, the Electric 12 was forgotten and eventually discontinued in 1969. Contrary to general belief, the CBS initially tried to bring a breath of fresh air in the Fender catalog. The German luthier Roger Rasmeisl became the head of the research and development department, and Virgilio Simoni was the product manager of stringed instruments. His middle name was Babe to his very young age. They led one of the most creative periods of the Fender company. In particular, they introduced a few variants of the Telecaster, such as the rosewood model we've seen in BTR number 3, and the thin line, some sort of semi-acoustic version of the Telecaster. The thin line features a chambered ash or mahogany body with a sound hole. It was designed to relieve the weight of the body, as by the end of the 60s it was getting harder to source the lightweight woods featured on older guitars. Other creations from this same period are the Paisley and floral lines, meant to appeal to the Californian hippie generation. These flashy finishes were achieved applying wallpaper on the top and back of the guitar. The Paisley Tally became the trademark instrument for Elvis Presley's guitar player James Barton. These instruments are now quite rare. In fact, they were only produced for a short period of time between 1968 and 1969, and when the San Francisco flower power was no longer trendy, many of these guitars and basses were stripped and refinished. Fender never threw anything away, and Virgilio Babe Simoni was assigned the task of recycling the leftover parts of the discontinued models that didn't get the expected commercial success. That's how a few weird and short-lived models were born. The Custom and the Maverick were assembled with the leftover bodies and necks of the Electric 12. The original shape was disguised with a few cosmetic changes, and the headstock was shortened while still preserving the distinctive hockey stick shape. Same story for the Swinger, Arrow and Musiclander, models aimed to recycle the unpopular short-scale necks of the Music Master and Mustang, and the leftover bodies of the unsuccessful 5-string Bass 5, still disguised with a few strokes of chainsaw. Leftover Music Master pickups and Wasonic bridges completed the patchwork. If you are interested in more in-depth information about the fabulous instruments of the Fender Vintage Museum, Flavio Camorani and Vincenzo Atzori released the book Our Vintage Soul, containing very detailed technical sheets with gorgeous pictures of most every item in the collection. I warmly recommend it to every fan of vintage Fender gear. Check out the website flaviocamorani.it to grab your copy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ciao.
Bye bye from Italy.
Ciao.
Also, if you love guitars as I do, you might like to subscribe the BTR channel and turn on notifications to keep posted with more new episodes.